There is a common human experience, in the face of embarrassment usually, where we often wish we could just fling ourselves haphazardly away from the situation, with no care as to what exactly would happen when we hit the ground. Truthfully, when I first got my hands on Herrera, I wasn't exactly sure what I was supposed to do with it. Climb things, okay, obviously, but then what? It was smaller than I had anticipated, weaker than I had anticipated, and although climbing was great, what kind of ambush predator in the Isle is so small that it can't properly hunt anything but AI? Because let's be honest, Hipsies and Dryos are endangered species, and if you're lucky enough to find one as a Herrera, you're probably not also lucky enough for them to just so happen to walk beneath the drop circle worth of range on the exact tree you just happen to be waiting in. Right? Well, over time I figured it out. Herrera is for throwing. At things, away from things, up things, down things, without a single care about what will happen when it finally touches the ground. My Herrera life began like so many other species on Gateway, as a fresh spawn with an attitude problem. You see, my friend Acronym had quite recently chased a bleeding, terrified, fresh spawn stego off a rather large cliff. Therefore, we had a meal. Or at least we did until the Carnoling showed up and tried to steal it. We couldn't have that. Several slaps and a Dilo attack later, the Carno decided to leave us to our food. For a moment, anyway. In the Isle, there's never a moment of peace when you're sitting on a fresh carcass, especially with Serato roaming around. Luckily, in this case, it was only a little one, and Acro quickly dispatched it with the power of the belly flop.
I killed him.
Sometime later, after resting and growing in a tree above our plentiful bounty of fresh spawn Serato, we started to make our way out of the canyon and back into the southern plains for fresh food. I stopped momentarily in a tree for some stamina and to grab a glass of water because I was coughing up a lung, and an incredibly skilled player decided to kill me while I was AFK. Because skill.
Meta, move! Let's go! We gotta go!
Anyway, we began our regrowth, sat in trees like a pair of iguanas, the whole bit. And then, thoroughly bored out of our minds after hunting AI and sitting in trees, we decided it was time to get a little devious. We discovered a small group of Carnos growing around the southern mud pit. I'm not generally one to kill fresh spawns if I can help it, but there's just something about being a tiny yeet lizard that brings out the devil in me, I guess. Regardless, we saw tiny Carnos protected by big Carnos, and we had to crush them. There's a certain level of fun in risking life and limb to be a tiny menace. Honestly, I'd have thought after the first couple of times we killed them, they'd choose to move on. Get away from the cliffside that we were quite prominently clinging to, and to a space that they could be better protected as they grew. I suppose, though, that some people just never learn.
kids.
10 baby Carnos, and the sub that fell off the cliff later. We called it a day and logged off. When I returned, the South Plains were barren and silent. Everyone and their dog has decided that the worst area on the map, Northeast and East Plains, is the place to be. As if yearning for the days of Spiro, they've shunned the vast reaches of Gateway and clumped themselves around a tiny watering hole in a sad open palm field. Resigned to my fate, I tossed my starving Herrera off the tallest mountain I could find and respawned within the hot spot. Here, growth was easy. AI was plentiful and the pond was surrounded by carnage on all sides. I reached adulthood without issue, but very quickly grew annoyed with the palm trees and my inability to regain any stamina at all while clinging to them. Regardless of my complaints about the area I was now trapped in, food was not uncommon there, and I found it sufficient for my needs. As this was a spawn zone, there was always a steady stream of hopefuls looking to strike out into the world. Or perhaps to simply strike out. An incredibly bold, fresh spawn Cerrado marched his little tail up to a carcass being scavenged by a few baby Herreras. Perhaps he didn't see me. Or perhaps he was just feeling sassy. Either way, his reign of terror didn't last for long before he was reminded of his proper place in the food chain. Sometime later, after a server crash, I was on the edge of starvation. Night fell as my stomach reached dangerously low levels, and I took advantage of the darkness to seek out anything I could find. Unfortunately for me, more than just Cerrados lurk in those darkest places. Envenomated, bleeding heavily, near starvation, and out of stamina, all I could do was cling pathetically to my tree and wait for death to come. Or at least that's what I would have done if I was a quitter. Resolved to survive, I waited only long enough to suspect the Dilo had left before sliding down the tree and waddling to the water's edge. There, just barely within reach, was a school of fish. My prize would keep me alive for now. I simply needed to survive my heavy blood loss and hope that I could find real food before starvation set back in again. Having survived my close brush with death, I returned to being an absolute menace to society. The things small enough for me to kill gave me my needed nutrition. When I could kill enough of them anyway. And those that couldn't simply kept me from getting too bored as a tree stalker. When I finally got sick of hanging around the same pond, killing the same fresh spawns over and over, I opted to attempt to migrate elsewhere. Seeking greener pastures, one might even say. Herrera's stamina when traveling through the treetops is appalling, so I found myself walking along the ground throughout much of my trek from East Plains to Northeast Lake. The lake, however, wasn't my final destination. I had a very specific place in mind for my new home. A tiny pond just outside a sanctuary. I knew the water source itself got a decent amount of traffic, but I wasn't sure how often that traffic was small enough that I could handle it as a tiny tree lizard. My choice to move to a place with uncertain resources would ultimately be my downfall. You see, I am a stubborn person. Usually, my stubbornness pays off, and I can point and laugh at everyone who tells me my idea was misguided. In theory, this pond should have been a great spot. Sanctuaries should contain a plethora of juveniles to small subadult dinos. And this one in particular had an incredibly convenient water source close by. Heck, Even the tree I chose was tall enough to do decent damage if I slapped something, and close enough that it gave me full range of the entire edge of the pond. Unfortunately, on this particular day, the area was quiet. I spotted a medium to small Serato close to my size, and body slammed him into the ground. Sadly for me, I did not deal enough damage to make the kill, and didn't make it back into position quickly enough to go for another hit. I wasn't worried yet, though. I still had plenty of food left in my stomach. Something else would come along. I'd be fine! A fresh adult Dilo entered the arena. Knowing how slow they are to gain weight, I hoped that perhaps I'd be able to take him down. I don't know about you, but the fact that my ambush predator takes longer to get up from a stun than the thing I stunned, well, I do not approve. Another Dilo appeared. This one was larger, but I no longer cared. I'd been in this tree for far too long already, and I was not going back to East Plains. I slapped the Dilo and made a break for the tree. Unfortunately for me, I took a nip and was instantly envenomated. I would have to wait it out, unable to see properly, unable to sniff, and with a pack of Dilos invading my pond in the fog below. By the time 10 minutes had passed and the venom was gone, so was my food. I was on the verge of starvation, with nothing to show for my attempted hunts, but a near-empty stomach and a single bullfrog that gave me 1% food. I was doomed. Unable to find anything to keep me here and red on food, I began the slow and disappointing trek back toward the hot spots. I had enough health that even in starvation mode, I'd be fine. Except I wasn't. Remember how I'd been envenomated by a Dilo previously? Remember how I'd healed from that encounter and was no longer suffering from hallucinations? Well, I guess we have all remembered wrong. A rogue hallucination spawned after I'd healed from my envenomated status. As good as dead, I continued marching onward. It's not over till it's over. Perhaps Gateway would come in clutch and provide for her tree child. She did provide, but not in the way one would hope. Not food. Simply someone friendly. Someone to bear witness to my demise. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and a comment. If you're new around here, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.